Hello and welcome to Tuesday Club again. We're continuing to think on the book of Judges, and we're continuing to see how God rescues his people. Now remember, they have rejected him, they've turned away from him, they said shove off God, and he sends them into slavery. They then cry out to God and say, God forgive us, and he raises up a rescuer or a judge who then leads the people out of slavery and into peace. The rescue judge then dies again, and that cycle just repeats. Well, that's what we continue to think about tonight. But we're going to start off with a question. Have you ever tried to make a bargain with God? I know I have. There are times when I've said to God, God, if you do this for me, then I'll do that for you. Or if I really want something, I'll say to God, God, I'm going to do this for you, and then give me this amazing thing up here. I've tried to bargain with God. I've tried to get my own way to actually get what I want rather than what God wants. Actually, if it's really bad, what I sometimes say to God is, actually God, I really don't want to do what you're asking me to, so I'm going to ask this amazing, miraculous thing of you to try and get out of doing what you really want me to. And that's a bit like our story tonight. We're going to see how somebody in our story puts God to the test, and we're going to see how God responds. So, the person we're thinking about tonight is a person called Gideon. Now, a lot of the people come across in the Bible aren't special, and Gideon was one of these. He was from the weakest family in the area, and he was the weakest or least in his family. So he was probably the youngest in his family. He's part of Israel that's being ruled by the Minilights. So they've come and taken over Israel, God has sent them to take his people into slavery. And the Midianites are a really powerful nation. So powerful that the Israelites are hiding in caves and other places and trying to hide their food away just to get some food to eat. So when we first find Gideon, we see he's hiding in what's called a wine press. It's basically a big hole in the ground. He's there cowering. He's hiding away from the Midianites. He doesn't want them to find him or find his food. But then God comes and speaks to Gideon, and he says this, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Now, hang on. Did we just hear God say mighty warrior? Here's Gideon hiding away in a wine press, and yet God says to him, mighty warrior. You see, God is not looking at who Gideon is. God is seeing who Gideon will be. Not in Gideon's own strength, but with God working through Gideon and in him, and using Gideon to be a mighty warrior. And I wonder if we ever think a bit like that we look at ourselves and think, I can't do anything for God. How could God use me? Well, actually, this is something to be encouraged by. That because we have a powerful and amazing God who works miraculously, he can work through us, and he can use us for great things. Not because of anything special about us, but because he is amazing and wants to use us for his glory and for his kingdom. But anyway, even with Gideon hearing this from the Lord, he's not convinced. So he asks God for a sign. And God says, take some bread and some meat and put them on a stone. And that's what he does. I'm going to pretend that this is meat and this is bread. So he takes some bread and some meat and puts it on a stone. Now when Gideon had done that, the Lord touched the meat and the bread with the tip of his staff, and the rock underneath suddenly burst into flame, and the bread and the meat were completely and utterly consumed. Gideon then realises that it's God speaking to him. Now, you'd have thought that he'd get the point by this, but he's still not entirely convinced. So there's a bit of back and forth still, in which Gideon listens to God but not entirely, and eventually the people become onto God's side, onto Gideon's side, and they're prepared to follow him. And so God says to Gideon, go and lead my people out of slavery, go and defeat the Midianites. And do you know what Gideon says? I'm still not sure. Let me just check that it's really me that you want leading. And so he puts God to the test. He tests God by saying, I'm going to put down a fleece on the ground. If you put dew on the fleece, but leave the rest of the ground dry, then I'll believe it's you really wanting me to go. So guess what? The next morning, Gideon wakes up and he finds the fleece wet with dew. But he found the ground absolutely dry around it. Now, most of us would probably starting to be convinced by now. Not Gideon. Gideon's still not quite there. So Gideon says, actually, God, you know what? I got that wrong. This time, can you please make the fleece dry, but the ground wet? And he goes to sleep. And guess what? Next morning, Gideon wakes up, and the fleece is dry, but the ground is wet. Finally, Gideon is convinced. He's convinced that God is going to be with him, that God is going to lead his people out of slavery. How he does that? Well, we'll find out more about that next week. But for now, I don't know about you, but if I was God and Gideon had started putting me to the test, I would have gone, you know what, you can go back to your wine press. I will find someone else. I will still do it, but I'll find someone else instead. But actually, I feel I'm more like Gideon. I'm very slow to believe God's amazing promises. I'm very slow to hear what God says and do it. I'm very slow to believe that God could even possibly use me. I'm in fact so like Gideon in the slowness of trusting in God. And that's why I really like the story of Gideon. I know I need God's amazing grace. You see, God gives Gideon something he doesn't deserve. Gideon deserves to be ignored, to be sent back to the wine press carrying a freight. But God uses him still. God says, I'm going to show you grace and use you. I need God to treat me with that same love, compassion and mercy that he showed to Gideon. I am so thankful that God has shown me all that grace through Jesus. So I can be confident that God has forgiven me and will use me for good deeds. Not because of me, but actually because of how amazing he is and that he works through me. So how about you? Are you still testing God to see if he is real and his promises are true, and actually you just need to see his grace and love? Or do you know his grace and love? Do you know that God has given everything for you? That God has sent his son Jesus to die for you so you can be forgiven? And are you going to see how God is going to use you for his glory and for his good? Now, I've skimmed over some quite big ideas, some quite big concepts there. So if you do have any questions about that, go to the website page, the Holy Trinity website page, find the Tuesday Club and drop me a question on there, or drop me an email, and we'll think about replying to it next week on the Tuesday Club. Let me pray, and then we'll finish. Dear God, thank you for the grace you show us. Thank you that we can be forgiven because of Jesus. Thank you that you use us for your glory and for your might. And it's not because of anything we've done, it's because you are wonderful and loving and gracious and compassionate. We pray that we know more of that love and grace and compassion now. Amen. Thank you for joining me. As I said, if you want to find out how the story of Gideon ends, come back next week and we'll see a bit more then. Thank you.